Hello, and welcome to the 22nd video in my Punishing Graven lore series. Today we'll cover the 15th chapter of the main story, The Last Spark. Previously in Inscription of Labyrinth, Commandant was taken by Corono and teamed up with Cerberus to explore an abandoned town, which turned out to be the childhood home of Lucia and Luna. Guided by Luna's memories, Commandant and 21 explore the town, learning what happened to the sisters during the outbreak, as well as having an encounter with Roland and a brand new ascendant named Voodoo. Having failed their mission objective, but gaining much more in the process, Cerberus is detained by Corono forces, with Hassan and Nicola beginning their plan to break the deadlock and set Commandant free. Now without any further delay, let's dive into Chapter 15, The Last Spark. "24 hours before Cerberus' mission, Nicola arrives at Colin's personal study. There they have a conversation about none other than Commandant, with Nicola demanding that Collins and Corono stop with their extended detainment. Nicola has been turning a blind eye as much as he possibly could to Commandant's treatment, as he and Collins have a deal. Nicola provides Collins with security clearance, and Collins gives him intel. To solidify his point, Nicola threatens to take away his clearance privileges, only to have his bluff called.
Stop the cap!
Collins knows he wouldn't back out of their deal this late into the game, especially since Nicola hasn't gotten the information he's after yet. Nicola's inaction is beginning to earn him Hassan's ire, and he's not willing to risk an open feud over one person. To add to that, Parliament is not too far from getting involved themselves, not because they care about Commandant, but because they care about their public image, and having the hero who saved the world from the polyphage locked in a cage won't sit with the people. Having heard enough, Collins jumps to the main topic. His people detected Luna's Mai signature in an old abandoned town, and he wants Commandant to help track her down. After a short bout of silence, Nicola resolutely refuses. If he starts breaking procedures now, it won't be long before their entire system collapses. In response, Collins pulls out an old paper folder labeled Top Secret, and this seems to get Nicola's attention. He caves and gives Collins the needed authority to deploy Cerberus and Commandant through the task force, with the stipulation that after the operation, Commandant will be set free. After the two agree to the terms, Nicola grabs the folder and leaves the room. 12 hours later, Nicola meets with Hassan and hands over the file, where Hassan reveals they were playing Collins and the entire meeting was planned to trick him into thinking Nicola was acting behind Hassan's back. Nicola is surprised that Hassan agreed to his plan since he has a soft spot for Commandant. But even with how much he values Commandant, Hassan can't stay in a stalemate with Corono forever. Eventually, something needs to break the deadlock, and Collins is getting bolder, acting out in the open, meaning he has something that gives him the confidence to do so. So while they have the upper hand for now, Collins isn't dumb and likely made a copy of the file. Hassan says this is a non-issue, as the file is incomplete on its own, and can only be made so with the files Murray stole from Gestalt, and together this information reveals the location of a zero-point reactor. Back on Earth, Vera continues to be questioned by the Corono constructs about the details of the mission, and her encounter with Voodoo. They ask about the detour she took from the planned route when she and Noctis got lost, and this causes her to point out the mission was to locate Luna. How can there be a planned route when they were sent to find her, making it clear she knows far more about what Corono's doing than she lets on. The hostility in her voice puts the constructs on guard, and their leader steps up to calm the situation, putting an end to the interrogation and arranging transport back to Babylonia. Vera demands to see her team, and the construct says that the abnormal mind patterns 21 showed during the mission warrant independent quarantine, and since all three of them came into contact with the new enemy, they will need to be put under observation. Before he finishes speaking, a blade is already at his throat, and Vera makes it perfectly clear that she is aware of their tactics and will not sit idly by like Grey Raven. Not too far away, 21 and Noctis begin causing a scene of their own, when she suddenly gets a message transmitted directly into her AV module. As a team directly under Nicola's command, he has an encrypted channel for high-priority solo missions. Having understood immediately, she sheathes her sword and whistles at her team, a signal used to convey a single command: sit. Vera watches as the other two transports take off, and as they try to force her on board, she lashes out, tearing a hole in their ranks. Back in Commandant's black box, after connecting with 21, his sense of smell seems to have gotten much stronger, but this doesn't explain why he's able to smell freshly watered dirt on what is supposed to be Babylonia. The constructs guarding him suddenly ready their weapons, but not at him. The wall of the room is ripped open, and within the blinding light, a hint of red flashes back and forth as construct soldiers drop to the ground. A blade slams into the chains holding him to the floor, and his eyes drift upward to meet Vera's gaze. Thinking he's still in Babylonia, he asks how she could possibly be here, and in response, she cuts open the opposite wall, revealing the inside of a transport cabin. Being very much in a rush, Vera tells him to seal the door, as she's going to pilot the ship to escape their soon-to-be pursuers. On Babylonia, Rebecca meets Collins in his study, informing him of Commandant's rescue at Vera's hands, saying the plan has backfired and the mission objective failed. This earns a laugh out of Collins, as he asks her what the mission objective even was. This gives her pause, as on the surface it was to track Luna, but she knows that was a cover, as Collins' priority seems to be Commandant's ability to seek out agents. However, Collins only cares about the agents themselves, and when given the choice, agents will always take priority. Yet he seems to be in no rush to track Luna, only sending a single team to investigate. Rebecca suddenly seems to have realized the deeper truth behind Collins' actions, and his crazed smile all but confirms it. She asks what their next move is, and it's simply to let them go. He knows that whatever Nicola found in that file was worth burning this bridge, so he will follow the aircraft to its destination and have Vera lead him straight to the rewards. Vera ignites the engine and the transport shoots into the sky. While the speed and angle are nothing for her, the same cannot be said for Commandant, who is instantly slammed with several times his body weight in G-forces, as the radar dots indicating Coronal pursuers drop off one by one. Noticing his poor condition, Vera lessens the climbing angle just a little, but the Machs on the speedometer continue to rise, with the stress of the takeoff and his already poor condition causing him to black out. He wakes up some time later to find he's being examined by Vera, who was checking his condition while he was unconscious. Seeing that he's awake and alive, she goes back to her more familiar coldness, as Commandant asks about their current situation, finding out she doesn't know much more than he does, only that she must get them both to another set of coordinates off in the distance. Silence returns to the cabin as Commandant stares out at the unchanging sea, when a small spike pierces through the ocean's surface, then another, and another, as a megastructure rises up from the depths. According to Vera, they have reached their destination, and since they are flying a Coronal jet, one most certainly being tracked, they can't exactly just land. She points out an airdrop beacon from Nicola and grabs a parachute. Now with a helpless Commandant strapped to her chest, Vera pops the chute and guides them to the landing zone, when Commandant suddenly realizes he can't pick up anything from within the structure. No sound, light, heat signatures, nothing. And in that instant, another word for the floating city appears in his head. Grave. A grave on the sea. After landing, Vera dives into the water, pulling up a supply crate marked with the word Garnet, and Commandant opens the crate as she walks up to the frame within. He assumes the frame is new, but Vera explains it's actually the opposite, as memories of the past reflect in her eyes. She gets changed and puts her usual frame into the box, when a video recording begins playing. Hassan congratulates the two for a successful rescue, and for making it to one of humanity's crowning achievements, this floating city that was once a 0-point reactor. Yes, a 0-point reactor. Hassan explains that the virus outbreak started at the first reactor, but the world government built a number of them, and the one they are currently at is codenamed Atlantis. Their task is to search the city and bring back anything that might be helpful in the fight against the virus. Currently, both Commandant and Vera are stuck in a very dangerous situation, since if Coronal's operation was legitimate, Vera's rescue is no different from treason. But Coronal's decision to sneak him to Earth caused an uproar on Babylonia. So while lines and loyalties are currently tangled, it's the best time to bring Commandant back over to the right side. If successful, the notoriety from this mission will put him in the public eye and make him untouchable by Coronal. But as of right now, he is both mission operator and fugitive, and which title stays depends on what they find in the city. Nicola steps in to address Vera, saying that he will protect the rest of Cerberus in her stead, when suddenly the ground begins to quake, and the once calm sea begins thrashing as the city begins its submergence protocol. Since it's not likely the corrupted are smart enough to do this, it means someone else must have arrived in the city first. They jump on a boat in the canal leading to the main city center, as they are attacked by corrupted carried in by the recent waves. But Vera notices the corrupted attacking are not native to the city and have been brought from the outside. 4 hours before the arrival of the Babylonians, another guest made her way to the city, bringing with her an army of corrupted gathered on her journey. And when she finally reaches the city, Lamia is overcome with a sense of nostalgia. After climbing out of the cavern to complete her deal with Murray, she makes a last-minute request. During her time as an Ascendant, she suffered some memory loss and has developed an obsession with a set of numbers in her head, coordinates, but the what, she can't remember. Only that whatever that place is extremely important to her. Having reached the main city, the two jump off the boat, and Vera's irritation is on full display. Assuming it's about her team, Commandant reminds her that Nicholas said he would protect them, only that's his naivety talking. As someone who's not used to seeing humanity's dark side, veiled threats often go over his head. Nicola was giving her a warning, not a promise, that the only thing protecting her team is him. She makes it clear there's no difference between the Parliament and Corono. They may present themselves in different ways, but fundamentally they are the same. Before she can say any more, the city quakes again, and more corrupted reveal themselves. The repeated high-intensity fights are causing Vera to overheat, so they hide in a nearby building, using the radiation-absorbing material to hide from the corrupted. Taking the chance to rest, she lets her frame cool down and begins treating her wounds, with Commandant finding her medical skill is no less impressive than Liv herself. While they sit, she opens up just a little, admitting some of her irritation stems from her believing the entire mission is stupid and rash. Even after the end of the world at the hands of a zero-point reactor, it seems those in power have learned nothing, as here they are looking for that same power once again. Before Babylonia, before even the virus, a young woman named Lustrous is sent to the city as the new research director. She finally lands and takes in the scene around her, a massive hub of innovation, solely dedicated to the advancement of the reactor. Any who are unable to contribute are shipped back to the mainland, as nothing is more important than their shared goal of zero-point energy. The city is cold and efficient, and as the new research director, she must uphold this position as an unwavering flag, and dedicate herself to progressing humanity into the next age. Vera and Commandant continue through the halls, noting the complete lack of chaos in the environment. Offices are neatly organized, files are sorted, not even footprints in the dust, as if everyone just vanished one day. Vera hates it. In the current world, having no signs of struggle, no debris, or even the facilities being functional is more fear-inducing than walking into a war zone. The city is flat out too clean. There's no sign of it having been infected or invaded by the corrupted, and most pressing of all is that no one is here. They know the facility wasn't designed to be self-sufficient, and the complete lack of bodies leads them to a conclusion they don't dare vocalize. After a moment of silence, Vera destroys a nearby door, attempting to get the attention of whatever might be lurking. Ever since entering the city, the uncanny atmosphere has created a sense of fear. But a fear of what? The unknown. And Vera's solution is simple. If there's anything out there, she will bring it right to them. Although this plan doesn't work, and the halls remain just as silent. They enter the office past the smashed door and approach the largest desk in the room, reading off the nameplate, Research Director Lustrous. Being the Research Director's office, they search for any useful information they can bring back, and while looking around, Commandant hits a button, replaying her video journal. Lustrous recounts how communications between Atlantis and the mainland were dropped, and due to all other options failing, she opened the city to receive public outside news, where they finally learned about the virus sweeping over the planet. Atlantis had escaped the first wave as it was submerged during the initial outbreak. Even so, she designated the virus as the highest priority, as such a technologically focused city was extremely vulnerable. The city was locked down, and approaching ships were sunk to minimize potential risk to exposure. After calling a meeting with the other department heads, it was decided that they would recreate the environment of the first reactor to figure out what went wrong and possibly how to fix it. The projection stops after the message finishes playing, and Vera looks even angrier than before, fuming at the thought they would purposely try to recreate the first reactor, equating it to lighting a match while standing atop a fuse. Commandant tries defending the researcher's decision, and Vera calls him out for being just like them, and not learning from their experiences. In his case, meaning trusting the Parliament even after seeing how they truly are. He makes it clear that he didn't choose Parliament, he chose humanity, and they just happen to represent the best chance humanity has. Seemingly satisfied with the answer, Vera backs down just a little, and seeing nothing else of relevance, they leave the building. Stepping outside, they see the city is still sinking, with their only options being find the reactor or stop the submergence. Opting for the former, Commandant hacks into one of the newly infected maintenance robots, searching through its patrol route and noticing it always avoids a specific section in the center of the city. Having found what is likely to be the reactor, they break through the surrounding security gates, but notice something is off. None of the gates are damaged. They were designed to reject any unauthorized ID signatures, meaning whoever triggered the submergence was not registered as an outsider to the barriers. After breaching the surrounding labs, they finally arrive at the inner chamber housing the reactor. Vera holds her hand up and the two stop. Hidden in the shadows is the one responsible for sinking the city. Lamia stands at the center of the reactor, silent and lost in her thoughts, only reacting right before Vera's spear hits her. Commandant has had numerous interactions with the Ascendant, so he is sure of one thing: Lamia is not herself at the moment. Vera charges in and Lamia takes a stance to counter, but doesn't. Instead, with sadness and anger in her eyes, she cloaks herself and vanishes. Not having the time to question why she's here, they run to the control panel to raise the city, only to find most of its functions are locked behind biometric authentication. Right after, another screen appears on the monitor, displaying footage of another department head meeting. At this time, Atlantis had been unsuccessful in contacting the mainland, and Lustrous was forced to proceed under the assumption all life outside the city had been annihilated. The city's supplies would last an estimated 15 months, but they would need 21 to recreate the conditions of the first reactor. They suggest ranking the different departments by order of necessity, and cutting off supplies to the least important to maximize efficiency. The meeting ends and the screen flickers to another recording, addressed to any who might manage to reach the terminal. Lustrous explains what happened to the city in the 3 years after the outbreak. She details how each department was cut off one by one as food supplies dwindled, eventually leaving only the researchers, who were arranged from least to most integral. Moving on to what they accomplished, they never managed to observe the virus, but they were able to record its effects, like not seeing a raindrop, but seeing the ripples in the water. The energy that absorbed the virus was cataloged in what she calls the Omega file, which is in her possession at the top of the city. While there were many who doubted their decision to continue their research, in the end it was all they could do. They played their part to the very end, and now it's time for those outside to carry the torch. And with that, Lustrous signs off. The recording ends and Vera is the first to speak, calling the researchers insane for willingly repeating an endless cycle of experiments and failures. A tear comes to her eye as she remembers she was just like them, killing and surviving in Corono, until Nicola appeared one day and offered an out, a possible ending. The discussion is interrupted by the cracking ceiling, and with the city out of time, they race to the top of the tower in search of Lamia. Having done all she possibly could, Lustrous heads to the top of the observatory. All this time she stood firm as the symbol of Atlantis, bearing the hard decisions till the end to keep everyone else moving forward. Now as the final survivor, the symbol can become a human. She no longer needs to maintain her facade of strength for the others. She can go back to being weak, to just being Lustrous. Vera and Commandant open the door and there they find the same woman sitting by the window. Vera walks towards the body and to her shock finds a supply crate full of food. Unlike the others, Lustrous didn't die of starvation. Instead, she chose to end her own life. Vera begins laughing hysterically and stuffs the food into her mouth as if carrying on Lustrous' will. She reaches into her pocket and takes the file, the legacy of all those who once called the city home, giving it to Commandant. And with that, she heads to the roof to force Lamia to stop the submergence. There she finds a mermaid staring at the sky as the rain covers her tears, a look of complete desperation, an expression Vera knows personally. Even so, she points her spear, demanding Lamia raise the city. In response, Lamia draws her twin blade, telling Vera to let the city sink as she charges forward.
私はあなたたちの夢を奪う。あなたたちの失った私が引き受けてあげるわ。誰にも渡さない。沈め。
The two clash, sending out shockwaves through the rain. Vera is about to pierce through the butterfly on Lamia's chest when a wave crashes into them, throwing off her aim. Still, the blow hits Lamia's arm, leaving a wound that exposes her metal bones. She screams out in pain and frustration. Even in her element, surrounded by the raging ocean, she cannot defeat the woman in front of her. With victory deemed impossible, she jumps into the waves behind her and disappears. After the fight, Vera takes a seat, wondering why she bothered to go this far if she already had the data she needed. But what's done is done. The past needs no explanation. With Lamia gone, the city has fully submerged when she spots small black dots on the horizon. Transports, but not Corono. Instead, Babylonia ships with Grey Raven logos on their wings. Suddenly below her feet, the city quakes again and begins rising from the depths just as fast as it sunk. The sun once again shines on Atlantis, and Vera plants her spear into the ground, reclaiming the once lost city in the name of humanity. Long ago, a massive explosion shakes the entirety of Atlantis, and Lustrous arrives to try and manage the situation. She demands that Libya, the researcher in charge, be removed from the city, but she is among those critically injured. Soon she receives the call that Libya has passed, but she was pregnant, and the medical staff were able to save her child. Lustrous arrives at the medical center and finds the staff surrounding a newborn child, a little girl, with her legs having been mangled during the accident. To the staff's surprise, on the brink of death, Libya had a massive contraction, allowing them to remove the child. Due to the nearing submergence day, she cannot send the child back to the mainland, so for the time being, the girl will have to stay in the city. The doctors volunteer Lustrous to give the girl a name, and while reluctant to do so at first, she eventually settles on the name Lamia. Present-day Lamia wanders through the city, stumbling into an old office that brings up her forgotten memories. Lustrous walks into the medical director's office, and in the corner of the room finds a small padded section to house the young girl. Naturally confused as to why she's still here, the staff's explanation boils down to being too busy to bother sending her back. She is still crippled, and Lustrous suggests outfitting her with prosthetics when she gets older, hinting that she's still open to having Lamia around more permanently, and when she reaches a more appropriate age, Lamia receives her legs. Some time after the surgery, Lustrous asks the administrative director about Lamia's status, and she reveals that all the staff within the city are taking quite a liking to her. Lustrous continues to make a number of visits as Lamia grows up, watching over her as she receives her basic schooling. The data director comes to test Lamia's knowledge and she fails spectacularly as Lustrous' mouth unknowingly slips into a smile. After a long day's work, Lustrous returns to her room and finds Lamia waiting outside. Lamia works up the courage to ask Lustrous what a mother is after having been sent to her by the medical staff. Understanding where the conversation is going, Lustrous pulls her inside and brings up Libya's file, explaining that this is her mother and what happened the day she was born. Lamia asks for a copy of Libya's photo and is firmly denied, sending her into a fit as she runs away in tears. Lamia wanders through the halls thinking about that day, recalling how her attitude with Lustrous lasted quite a while, up until the virus swept across the world. In the blink of an eye, her entire life changed. Food and supplies were limited, and dwindled to nothing as time passes. She remembers a book she once read, describing the concept of a famine, a near unthinkable outcome before, but now seeming all too real. Some time later, Lamia watches as the medical director writes down notes and instructions in preparation for the dissolution of his department. He explains to her that due to the decreasing food supply, departments will be systematically cut off to prolong those most integral to the reactor. Hearing this, Lamia breaks down into tears, the fear of death overwhelming her. She asks how she can live longer, and the director says the only way is to become useful, suggesting she undergo bionic modifications. This will allow her to retrieve samples from outside Atlantis, thus making her a valuable source of information, and she agrees without a shred of hesitation. Lamia now sits in the operating room, surrounded by dozens of curious staff members, including Lustrous herself. She goes to confirm that Lamia willingly volunteered for the procedure, and after confirming as much, she leaves the room. After the operation, Lamia wakes up on a hospital bed, feeling all the new additions to her body. Metal arms, a metal plate on her head, as well as augments to her lower body. The medical director wastes no time, grabbing Lamia and having her begin trials to adapt to the ocean and her new body. After the medical department staff finish their last meal, they head outside to the edge of the city. Lustrous kneels down and gives Lamia her final task, to go out across the ocean, reach land, and bring back news on if the virus has subsided. Having been given her new purpose, she turns around and leaves without a moment's hesitation. As she disappears into the night, Lustrous and the medical director have a rare moment to speak their minds, outside the context of research. They talk about Lamia, why they bother taking care of her, and all the things that make her unfit to be in Atlantis. She isn't very smart, strong, or capable. In fact, she's quite weak in all aspects, but that weakness is exactly what makes her human, more human than anyone else within the city. She was never meant to be here. That is why the director performed the operation and trained her so hard in the simulators, to give her the best chance of survival when she inevitably left. With his final words, the director realizes that Lamia was right. He doesn't want to die. Even though rationally he knows this is the only correct course of action, and even though he spent years staring at the same sky, deep down, he still has that human weakness to see tomorrow. Following her fight with Vera, Lamia lets herself sink, wondering how she could have allowed herself to forget her past, leaving her to live like a zombie. No goal, drive, or passion, just survival. When she first arrived on land, she had no inver device and was infected near instantly, causing her to forget her old life, only leaving her with a vague wish that eventually led her back here. Back when she first arrived at the central reactor, the terminal picked up on her biological identification and played a second video addressed to her personally. "You are back. You are a useful child. Welcome home. Now you are free." Even though she was never supposed to get attached to these people, the scientists who only saw her as an experiment, she couldn't help but have her heart shatter as the memories came flooding back, and Lustrous recording was the last straw, plunging her into utter despair. She no longer belongs anywhere else in the world. Her ascendant colleagues are dead or missing, and the only thing she had resembling a family died within the city. She activates the submergence protocol to let the city rest under the waves, where she can imagine all those people are alive and well, researching deep beneath the ocean. But after falling into the water and looking out over the city, she realizes Atlantis was their greatest achievement, as well as their grave, and as long as it stands, it serves as proof they all once existed. She swims down and terminates the submergence, and as the city rises out of the water, she turns and swims into the depths, allowing the sea to wash away her sorrows and regrets. leaving the city behind as a reminder that Atlantis once lived, and so did they. Alright, and we are done with the fish chapter. And this concludes the Grey Raven imprisonment saga that started way back in chapter 14. And we got to go on a work vacation with Vera, so all in all, win. Man, I kind of wanted to do what I did in Fern Knight, like a boss fight sequence, but you know, there was a perfectly good cutscene, so I just decided to go for that instead. It was a very straightforward chapter, so not a lot of stuff for me to elaborate on. Well, plus if I have to explain too much, that means the video didn't do its job, so I guess it's a good thing. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next video where we cover chapter 16 of the main story, Evernight Beat.